Psychology has shown us for a long time that intelligence is not just about how much information you have stored in your brain. It is not about how many facts you can recall or how many books you have read. Real intelligence shows itself in how you think, how you process new information, and how honest you are with yourself when you are wrong. And here is the part that surprises most people. One of the biggest signs of low intelligence is the belief that you are already smart enough. When a person stops questioning themselves, they stop growing. And when they stop growing, they fall behind without even realizing it. So let us talk about 5 psychological signs that you may not be as intelligent as you believe you are. The first sign is overconfidence. You think you are right most of the time. Now, this might sound like a good thing at first, but psychology tells us something very different. Highly intelligent people actually tend to doubt their own conclusions more often than others do. They pause, they check themselves, they ask whether they might be missing something. But people who have lower cognitive flexibility, meaning people who struggle to think from different angles, often feel certain about almost everything. Psychology connects this pattern to something called overconfidence bias. This is where a limited understanding of a subject creates the false feeling of total clarity. The less you actually know about something, the more confident you feel about it. And the more you know, the more you realize how much is still uncertain. So, if you rarely question your own conclusions, if you almost always feel sure that you are right, that is a signal worth paying attention to. The second sign is that you refuse to change your mind. A lot of people see changing their opinion as a form of weakness. They think it makes them look unsure or unstable. But psychology actually shows us the complete opposite. Changing your mind when you are presented with strong and honest evidence is one of the clearest signs of real intelligence in action. Smarter individuals update their beliefs because they care more about being accurate than about being right. But when a person holds on to an idea simply to win an argument or to protect how they feel about themselves, their thinking becomes rigid. And rigid thinking is dangerous because it builds a wall around your mind. Nothing new gets in, nothing old gets questioned. And without that honest back and forth between what you believe and what the evidence shows, growth becomes impossible. The third sign is that you oversimplify complex things. The world is almost never black and white. Most of the important issues in life, whether they involve people, decisions, emotions, or society, are layered and complicated. But some people have a strong habit of reducing everything into simple and absolute answers. They say things like always or never. They say it is obvious or it is simple. Psychology suggests that this kind of thinking reflects what is called shallow processing. It means the brain is not going deep enough into the information. It is stopping at the surface and calling it done. Real intelligence recognizes nuance. It sits with the uncomfortable feeling of something being complicated and keeps thinking anyway. If you find yourself constantly reaching for the simplest explanation, that is worth examining honestly. The fourth sign is that you do not ask questions. Curiosity is one of the most powerful and consistent indicators of intelligence that psychology has ever identified. People who rarely ask why something works the way it does, or how something came to be the way it is, tend to stay at a surface level of understanding. They know what things are, but they do not understand them. Psychology shows that without genuine curiosity, the brain stops expanding. It stops making new connections. It stops reaching for deeper meaning. And when a person believes they already know enough about a subject, they close the door on learning anything more. The most intelligent people in history were almost always the ones who never stopped asking questions, even about things they already understood well. The fifth sign is that you blame everything on other people. Every single person on this planet faces challenges that come from outside of themselves. That is a normal part of life. But there is a very important difference between acknowledging an external challenge and constantly blaming other people for every single failure or difficulty you experience. Psychology connects intelligence with something called metacognition. That is the ability to step back and honestly examine your own behavior, your own choices, and your own role in how things turned out. When a person never looks inward, when they always find someone else to point at, they never discover what they could have done differently. And without that honest self-examination, real improvement becomes almost impossible. Psychology makes one thing absolutely clear. Intelligence is not about appearing smart in front of other people. It is not about sounding impressive or winning conversations. It is about thinking clearly, adapting honestly, and being genuinely willing to question yourself even when it is uncomfortable. Overconfidence, rigidity, oversimplification, lack of curiosity, and constant blame do not just limit a person's success in life. They limit the thinking itself, because sometimes the biggest sign of low intelligence is simply not realizing that you might need to grow. Be honest with yourself about where you stand. And there is something else worth understanding that goes even deeper than these 5 signs. The human brain is wired to protect itself. It does not like being wrong. It does not enjoy the feeling of uncertainty. So it builds shortcuts. It creates patterns and assumptions that feel comfortable and familiar. And most of the time, a person does not even realize this is happening. They genuinely believe they are thinking clearly, when in reality, they are just thinking safely. And safe thinking is almost never the same as smart thinking. There is a concept in psychology called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and it explains so much about why people overestimate their own intelligence. When a person has very little knowledge or skill in a specific area, they lack the very tools needed to recognize how little they actually know. They do not have enough understanding to see the gaps in their understanding. So they feel confident, they feel capable. But as a person genuinely grows in knowledge and experience, something interesting happens. They start to feel less sure of themselves, because now they can actually see how vast and complex the subject really is. They understand enough to know how much they are still missing. This is why the most genuinely intelligent people are often the most humble ones in the room. Another thing that separates sharp thinkers from those who only believe they are sharp thinkers is how they respond to criticism. When someone points out a flaw in their thinking or challenges something they believe, do they get defensive immediately? Do they shut down the conversation? Do they attack the person instead of addressing the actual point being made? Psychology shows that emotionally reactive responses to criticism are deeply connected to ego protection, not intelligence. A person who is truly secure in their thinking can hear a challenging idea and sit with it. They can examine it without feeling personally threatened. They can even say the words "I had not thought about it that way before," without feeling like they have lost something. There is also the matter of how a person consumes information. In a world where content is everywhere and attention is short, many people mistake exposure for understanding. They watch a short video or read a headline and feel like they now understand a topic. But psychology draws a very clear line between recognition and comprehension. Recognizing that you have heard something before is not the same as truly understanding it. Deep understanding requires time, repetition, honest questioning, and the willingness to sit with confusion long enough for real clarity to develop. People who jump quickly from one piece of information to the next without pausing to truly process what they have absorbed are building what psychologists sometimes call an illusion of knowledge. Everything feels familiar, but very little is actually understood. And perhaps the most honest thing psychology has ever told us about intelligence is this: it is not a fixed destination. It is not something you either have or you do not have. It is a process. It is a daily practice of staying open, staying humble, and staying genuinely curious about the world and about yourself. The moment a person decides they have arrived, the moment they stop questioning, and stop listening, and stop growing, that is the moment real intelligence begins to quietly leave the room.